Welcome to our very first Union League Club of Chicago Women's History Month. However, this is going to be annual. It is our first, but it will be annual. So we're celebrating women of Illinois, past, present, and future. My name is Wendy Betts. I'm the chair of the Gender Equality Subcommittee, which is part of the Union League Club's Public Affairs Committee. We are the only private club in the U.S. that has a mission of public policy. The Gender Equality Subcommittee is dedicated to discussing issues of gender such as equal pay, workplace harassment, and career advancement to ensure equal rights regardless of gender. An example, last month we had someone from Women Employed come and speak to us about equal pay. This month, on Monday, March 25th, we're partnering with our entrepreneur group to discuss the gendered organization, how systems and practices can perpetuate inequality in the workplace. This isn't part of my speech, but I do want to just pause here for a second, and I want to thank the men for being here today. A lot of times people say these are brave. I don't know why. It's not like we're going to tie them up and paint their toenails purple. But these are men who get it. That's what I like to say. I like to say these are men who get it. These are men who understand that it is important to have gender equality, and they want to come to the table to help women achieve gender equality. So thank you. So, as I mentioned, the club does have a rich history of public policy, but it did take a little bit longer for women to become members of the club. Women started becoming members in 1987. Sorry, I had to give the year out. However, to go with our theme, today, just under 50% of committee membership is women here at the club. So, if you're a member of a committee here at the club, can you please stand for just a minute so we can recognize you? And as for our future, our next two club presidents are going to be women. So Martha and Nancy. 100 years ago, women, a long time ago, women were finally able to vote. Today, according to, I got these statistics from Rebecca's book, so women outnumber men among registered voters. Women turn out to vote at rates that equal or exceed men's rates. And for the past 8 consecutive presidential elections, women have outvoted men. And in our future, Chicago will have its first female African-American mayor. It's really my pleasure to introduce both Nancy Cohn and Rebecca Sive. Nancy is passionate advocate for social change and has distinguished herself through her work with nonprofits, political candidates, and progressive organizations. In the past, she is well known for her work with Senator Dick Durbin. Nancy has served as a senior staff advisor for 2 decades. In the fall of 2013, she led fundraising and strategy efforts for the successful campaign to bring marriage equality to Illinois through the Illinois Unites for Marriage Coalition. Present since, yay. Presently, since 2003, Nancy and her firm, Nancy Cohen Consulting, have provided strategic counseling and fundraising assistance to many Democratic Senate candidates, progressive candidates, and organizations. She's the chair of the Jewish Women's Foundation of Metropolitan Chicago and serves on the board of directors for the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership. In the future, she is looking forward to Saturday night, where she's going to have her 2 granddaughters, Zoe 3 and Beatrice 5, to come over and stay overnight. and I did want to just point one other thing. Nancy and I just met tonight. I swear we did. We did? We didn't call each other?
You got a memo I didn't get.
All right, I'm very excited to introduce Rebecca Sive. Rebecca's career has spanned executive positions in business, government, philanthropy, and the nonprofit sector, where she's earned a reputation as a smart and inspirational women's leadership strategist. Her book, Every Day is Election Day, A Women's Guide to Winning Any Office from the PTA to the White House, has been praised as an indispensable guide for professional women who seek to make a difference in civic, political, and policy arenas. And I can tell you personally, as someone who's a very big advocate for women in politics, reading that book was actually a huge help to me. I'm not planning on running for any public office, but it was a huge help to me in helping other women get elected to public office. She has spoken at way too many venues, way too many times for me to go through.
And I have the gray hair to prove it.
But I can tell you from experience, she is an absolutely outstanding speaker, and I've had the pleasure of hearing her speak several times. Today, Rebecca is busy promoting her new book, but she has also designed a women's public leadership initiative at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. The program was created to enable women to overcome gender bias, build on success, recover from failure, expand their influence, advance their careers, and take their place in public square. In the future, Rebecca's hoping that it warms up so she can work in her garden. And personally, I don't even have a garden, and I hope it warms up. But she also is looking forward to, for whomever wins, she wants to work with all women to help them win and every woman in the room. So just a reminder, Rebecca still will be here afterwards, so make sure you stop by and get one of her books. And I'm going to turn it over to Nancy and Rebecca. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to, before Nancy and I chat, just say a couple of things by way of thank you and context. First of all, thanks to Nancy for agreeing to do this. It's really fun and a little bit scary to do this with someone I've known as long as I have, which is both a good thing and she knows. Behind the press releases, no. Secondly, I want to thank the Union League Club. We were talking earlier, and I so appreciate your being here, about the history of the club and how it has developed over time, and I'm just delighted that it has embraced the city as a whole in these last decades. It's really important. And then thanks to my dear friends at the YWCA, Joanne Lilick, former president of the board of directors, who is an amazing leader of women, and all of us who've worked at and for the Y are very grateful for her service. And Dory McWhorter and Molly Silverman and their team. Also Audra, are you here, Audra? I didn't see you, from the League of Women Voters, who has really energized the organization and made it possible for us, all of us who were so energized by the outcome of the 2016 election, to find a further role to play in the League as well as in the Y. As was mentioned, I've worked here a long time, lived here a long time. My husband and I moved to Chicago after we graduated from college, in part because of our interest in politics. I participated in a urban studies program. It was there that I first read some really important initial books. Perhaps we'll talk about some of this today in terms of the history. One was Sisterhood Is Powerful. And I fell in love with Chicago and have been fortunate to be able to be here. And over the course of this time, I've met some wonderful women who are in the room today who have also been amazing leaders in our city on behalf of all that's right. And I want to recognize them, and then I'll sit down. One of them is Beth Davis, who's sitting, where are you, Beth? Beth and I went to college together. Carleton College, home, as I was told the other day, of quirky smart kids. Beth is a former trustee of the college and has been an activist here for decades and decades. Her mother was an early leader, speaking of history, of the history of women in politics, specifically in Nebraska, but really for the whole country. And also Ann Lozine, who's a professor at DePaul Law School. Thank you, Ann. And I I'd say it's 4 decades and counting. And Judge Sheila Murphy. And then I want to just, yes, the claps are in order. Last but not least, Kathy Hurley and Brian Starr for your gracious work in putting this together. And then one other thing, I'm both very practical and very positive about the change that we can make in our world. And so I think Nancy and I are going to get into some really hard-hitting questions, but we start this from a place of positivity, is that the word? And reflecting, for instance, on the letter to the editor that Dory sent to the Tribune the other day when she talked about that's the way we ought to go. So we're going to look at our history and our future and our present honestly, but in that context of this expression that I now am seeing, and I'm so glad to see, yes, she can. So with that, I'll sit.
Good afternoon. I also want to give a special shout out to David Cohn, who also works at the Union League Club. We spell our last names the same way. We've worked together and we're not related. It's unusual, K-O-H-N. Rebecca, when Indira Gandhi became the first and to date the only female prime minister of India in 1966, just one modern day country, Mongolia, had previously seen a woman in power. By 1991, the number of countries that had some experience under female leadership had reached 20 in 1991. Today, 70 countries have had some sort of female leadership, either elected, appointed, interim, or other. Why do you think the United States has lagged behind other countries in electing a woman?
So she starts out with the hardest question.
You've written a whole book about it.
I know, I have.
You know, I meant to bring up the book to show that you've written a whole book about it. So, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I thought about this a lot, of course, when I was doing the research for the book. And one thing that's important for us to understand as Americans is that for the most part, the women who have been heads of governments in other countries have been elected through a parliamentary process, not through the citizenry being able to vote. That's very different. It's important. It's also difficult. I respect those women, as we all do, but it's very different. They only need to convince the members of their party, right, to have them be the leader. So that's number one, that we're playing on a different playing field. The second thing is that you'll also find, and I'm not speaking to the merits, of course, of any woman's leadership, you'll also find that for the most part, those countries are smaller than the United States, significantly smaller. They're also, in some cases, less diverse, particularly racially, and that is really important in the history of the United States and our voting history, as you know. We can get into that some more. And I think the last thing I would say about why this has taken as long as it has is it is only in the lifetimes, depending on how old you are, that of our grandmothers, maybe great-grandmothers, that we have had suffrage, right? That is women. And what we needed to do, and is to figure out after suffrage, what was the next big mountain to climb, right? And it's my view, and I think I say this in the book, that the next big mountain to climb was getting women into office, whatever kind of office, right? And so, for instance, Beth's mother was an example of that. Then, after we did that, showed that women can lead, women can run, women can win, women can do a good job. After that, we could focus on executive office. And what I would say there is, it is still true, not only, and this is in the book also, not only have we not yet elected a president, while we have elected a lot of women to legislative office, there haven't been many women elected to executive office. So today, in 2019, there are 9 women governors. There are 15 or so, maybe it's 11, I can't remember, attorneys general. There are less than 20 statewide women executives who handle financial matters as a comptroller, whatever the title is. So it's been a real struggle to, in the first place, elect women to legislative offices, in some cases to judgeships, in some places where you get to be a judge by being elected, And now we're at this phase of looking at, yes, she can be our president. Or our mayor, for that matter. It's been a long time since we had a woman mayor, and we've only had one.
You touched on this in your answer, and I think you gave a great answer, and I took notes. When we think about president or governor or mayor, is that a harder office for women to run for than a legislative office? Are we looking for different qualities in those leaders? Is that why it's harder?
I think you're onto something here. Yes, it turns out that we are. The challenge is this. The notion, when you're an executive, whether you're the head of a club or a business or a foundation or of a government, the buck stops here, right? You're the last person, the only person to make certain decisions. And you also, secondly, have powers that other people who hold office don't have. So, for instance, the power of appointment, the power of deciding about a budget. It turns out, not that this is going to come as a big surprise to a lot of people here, but that it's as true in government as it is in business, as it is in university heads, philanthropy heads, that the notion of a woman having that ultimate power is a notion that institutional decision makers have, I'm trying to think of a way to say this politely, rejected. There have been women at the senior exec level or the executive level or executive VP level, whatever, and they don't become president of the company or CEO. Likewise in government. So I think it's because it's this notion that one person sitting behind that big desk, oh, a woman is going to tell me what to do? I'm not quite ready for that.
Well, Chicago better get ready.
Exactly.
So this morning, I don't know if anyone else had this experience, the Chicago Tribune ran a poll to help you pick which mayoral candidate you should vote for. But it asked a series of questions, and you weighted how important it was. And the end of the result for me was about 55% for one and 53% for the other. My husband took it, same experience. But we are facing a new chapter in Chicago. What would you say, is this unprecedented for two women to face off? And what could we expect from a campaign? Do these women have to campaign differently because it's woman against woman?
So in terms of this being unprecedented, absolutely. To my knowledge, we have made history in Chicago by selecting two women, and we should, those of us who voted, and if anyone in here didn't vote, take that
Shame
response.
on you.
Shame on you. Go ahead and vote April 2nd. We have made history here for large city by selecting two women to run. Mind you, the third largest city in the country, one of the most important cities in the world. So yes, it's unprecedented. As to how they will campaign and all of that, let me start by saying I know both Tony and Lori well. I'm, I guess, honored and proud to consider them colleagues and friends. And I can say to you that they're both, as you know, super smart, super well educated, super committed to the city, have clear ideas about what they want to do, are hard workers. So I think, on a going-in basis, Chicago should be grateful, I would say, that these two women have chosen to do this. As to how they will campaign, and have already campaigned in the week, it's already hard fought. And let me say something about this. I wrote in Every Day is an Election Day. The book was premised both on my own experience, but more importantly on the experience of about 30 colleagues who I interviewed to hear their lessons learned and stories they would share about running for office and being in office. A number of them were Chicagoans, you all know, including Tony Preckwinkle, Jan Schakowsky, Barbara Flynn Curry, and others like, for instance, Cecile Richards, who I'm sure you know. And 201, I mean, these women are committed women, as Tony and Lori are. I'm fighting every day, they said. Every day is election day. And the expectation that I'm not going to fight hard for what I believe in and figure out all the angles is an erroneous expectation. So at the same time, and Dory made this point in her letter, we do have an opportunity here, which hopefully we'll see, that both of these women spend more time than perhaps male candidates would on talking about issues of concern to women and girls, are receptive to the idea of meeting with women's organizations and women candidates and elected officials and talking about what they're going to do. And then they are going to take, I don't like the gun metaphor. They're going to criticize each other. So I guess I come from, one of my mentees was Mayor Washington, and he famously said, politics ain't beanbag, right? It's not for women or for men. And the women in this room who have run or worked on campaigns, you know that. We're going to see something different. They will talk about our issues. They will talk about other issues differently. I'm confident of that.
I agree about it's not beanbag, and that's, it's the thing about running for public office is that you really have to have thick skin, because it's not just you, it's your family, it's your inner circle who often unfortunately are in the news. But part of, we have two parts of in public life. One is the campaign, which you've just talked about, how they will campaign, and then one of them will be elected, and then they're gonna govern. And so the campaign is promises and the governing is implementing. And not just for these two women, but for women in general, do you think women approach public policy issues differently? So I think about a couple of different issues, and I'm going to throw them out there, and you could think about how you want to frame your answer. I'll give you a little bit of time. Do you think women would approach tax policy differently? Do you think having a woman in leadership would address climate change differently? How do you see the relationship between women and peace and war issues? Okay.
All right, can I leave now? No.
I have some opinions too.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Yes, as a fact matter, women do govern differently. So if you look at, for instance, in Illinois, but the Illinois experience can be writ large for the nation. When women started, and Anne knows all about this, I should say Professor Luzine, when women started to be elected to the Illinois legislature, which was in the 70s, in any significant numbers, what happened? Domestic violence, sexual assault, equal pay, child care. All of these issues began to be addressed. They hadn't been previously. Women legislators, women commissioners, women appointees to boards, women mayors, whoever they are, they do take special time and attention to issues of concern to women and girls. We would not be in the good place we are in terms of policies for that support and help women and girls were women not in these offices. So yes, it matters that women get elected. As to the climate change, peace, and tax policy, so when I did the research for Voter In, I found some really, I was thinking about this issue, and I found a really interesting article that I quoted from. It's actually in The Guardian, but I think it was a she. The author looked at women around the world who held public office and whether they were governing differently. And there were a couple striking examples to me. One was she had interviewed someone who was in some way, I can't remember exactly, involved with parks. And this woman had figured out that apparently, I'm paraphrasing here, the sidewalks weren't wide enough for baby carriages, or the stairs were difficult, or something like that. So this sounds little, but it's big, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it was her contention that this is not something apparently hadn't been thought about previously. There was another example cited in the interview with the then woman mayor of Nashville, who talked about the fact that when she, early on in her tenure, went out and looked at some construction sites, I think this is how it went, she saw signs that said men working. Well, you know what? So yes, I do think those are two good examples. In terms of tax policy, there are things like family medical leave and other kinds of benefits that have tax ramifications. And I don't know the facts jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but I can say that in the early 1990s, when President Clinton, a man, of course, was elected, he listened to women advocates on these matters related to tax policy in a way that, at least to my knowledge, no other president had. So it's really important that we have women in places next to those decision makers with access to the executive suite, and I think we will see changes in tax policy, both by men and women. As far as climate change is concerned, and this is a work that Nancy and I share. She and I have both done work for the Natural Resources Defense Council, and 20-something years ago or something like that, a while ago, NRDC had a project, and it had to do with mothers and organizing to be concerned about and do something about toxic waste. And this was an environmental organization, maybe others had done this, that really supported the women among its members and activists to figure out, yes, there are pieces of this issue that we know about, we care about, we want to do something about. And of course, these were moms who had responsibility for their child's welfare. So yes, I do think there's also the possibility on climate change. Last, on the issue of peace, so I just finished reading this very thick biography of Golda Meir. I recommend it to those of you who are sort of policy nerds on this stuff, or want to be inspired and really understand how these women who achieve those positions are able to do so. And it's clear from the book that she was as warlike as any other prime minister of Israel, as was true, for instance, of Indira Gandhi in India and Margaret Thatcher in Britain, just to cite three recent examples. The book makes no distinction, interestingly, between Meir's approach, and frequently she was the only woman in the room, and to date is the only woman who's ever been a prime minister of Israel, between her views and the men she worked with. So I don't know that it's the case that when women are in these executive positions, that they do look at it differently. They may look at it differently as a matter of policy. For instance, I think there were some women, U.S. senators, who voted for the war in Afghanistan and others who didn't. Had one of them who voted against that become president, maybe she would have carried out that view. At the same time, and I remember this from Illinois history, Jane Addams and the women who of her generation who were here and worked here, they took on the issue of peace and war. And if you haven't read about what those Chicago women did, it is inspiring. And for instance, Addams, who was admired by so many, was really, really castigated for her positions. So I think there are examples of women in leadership who have had the point of view and the courage. And for me, Ida B. Wells and Jane Addams are my sort of personal heroes. So I look at them and I say, well, if they did it, if they can work as hard as they did, I am too.
I have a speed round, and then we're going to open it up for question and answers. So my speed round is, can women win without conventional political credentials? Not just for president, but for other offices, without traditional credentials?
A number of women did this last go-around for Congress. Look at Lauren Underwood, a nurse who won in the western suburbs. Yes. So the answer to that is yes. If they're smart and talented and as gifted as Lauren is, yes, she can.
Is emphasizing being a woman a successful campaign strategy?
I believe it is, because I think that what a woman candidate brings to whatever office she's running for is a perspective that her male opponents don't have, and it's a perspective that the voters are going to appreciate.
How do women military veterans campaign? And is it easier for voters to see them as leaders?
You all saw what happened yesterday with Martha Mcsalley.
Oh. Does everyone know? Everyone's, yeah.
So she was the first woman fighter pilot. She was in the what? Air Force. Air Force. She served for 26 years, do I have that right? And was elected. She's a Republican this past fall.
No, she was appointed.
She was appointed.
She lost to Kristen. She lost to Kristen
Right,
Sinema.
right.
She lost, and then
She was appointed, excuse me.
appointed for the open seat.
So she talked yesterday about having been sexually assaulted in a hearing. So I don't think there's any question that women in the military can run and run well. I would just say that my hope is that for them, as well as every other woman, that they feel they can share these important and distressing experiences and build a coalition with other women just as soon as they can.
Thank you. So open it up to audience questions. Maybe you say your name.
If
and
you
then
have a question, just raise your hand and I will come to you with the
Dave,
microphone,
Dory?
okay?
Oh.
State your name and your question.
Ori Pennick and Rebecca, as always, I love you. But question about what I'm hearing in the African American community, as elated as I am as a native Chicagoan that we're going to make history yet again as it relates to women of color and black women. I am hearing from some of my male colleagues, African American male colleagues, that they are feeling disrespected in the campaign, and that the campaigns of both, as they said, are more gender oriented toward women. And my response to that has been, as I'm sure you know, it's about time that but I also add that, again, being a native Chicagoan and having the lowest voter turnout in the history, at least in my lifetime, of 30%. And I asked some of them had they voted, and they said no. And partly because they felt the male choices were not adequate. So again, I think part of, and you know this from Harold Washington and all the other history of Chicago politics, lower voter turnout, I think it's challenging no matter who the candidate is. And I think part of what we're going through now is a progressive time that I think I see it as progressive time, that many of, particularly younger, and these are younger people, younger than me, are not feeling empowered in their decision capacity. How would you answer some of the questions?
So you raised several obviously really important issues, and thank you for that, Ori. The first one is the choice to vote or not. I'm the daughter of an immigrant who kisses the ground when I'm going to cry when I talk about this. Voting in my family, and Dory and I have discussed this, as in her family, voting is a sacred duty and trust. So I really have no other view than that. If you have the right to vote, you ought to exercise it. Secondly, on the matter of the candidates who chose to run, there were 6 women, I believe. As a voter, each of us as a voter has a chance to look at the array of candidates, right? If we don't like any of them, we can vote somebody, we can write it in. We can say out loud to our friends, there's nobody good here. Whatever we want to do, we have freedom of speech, we can do that. But I think the smarter move is to look at the array of candidates and look at their policy positions and decide who is the person who best reflects what I think this city needs and what I and my family would like to see happen. So that's my response to that second matter about not being energized because there were so many people and I didn't like any of them. On the third point, which about the fact that there are 2 women running and they talk about themselves as women, I would again speak from the heart and say we are blessed that they are doing this. I was an early organizer and leader of Harold Washington's campaign, the revolutionary one, which was 1982. And I saw as close hand as anyone how revolutionary that time was. And a black man was running against a white man and a white woman. They chose to run, they campaigned forcefully, and to the point about saying, well, yes, I'm a woman, I've had these experiences, and this is what I know. Harold Washington said, I'm a black man, I understand what black people have been put through in this city. I can tell you about the discriminatory experience I've had, in a long list. And yes, I'm here to serve this whole city, and I'm also here to make sure that the people who have been discriminated against are thought about, served, helped, supported, get the chance to lead. And that same analogy applies to women.
And next question here from Dory McWhorter.
Thank you, Rebecca. Dory McWhorter, president of the Rebecca Sive fan club.
Oh, sweet.
We have that on tape somewhere.
I'm happy to record it again. So, question for you, we've talked a little bit about this, is that in the corporate world, there's been so much emphasis on women getting into senior leadership roles, board levels, executives, but we don't see that type of emphasis as much until really, at least I've been paying attention more because of the work that you've been doing. What do you think will be a catalyst to get women to pay attention as much as we do in corporate America about women getting in senior leadership, board suites, executive suites? We need those. We need that in government as well. What do you think will be the catalyst to actually make that happen, or for women to pay attention to it?
Yeah, it's well, Kathy's right. The more educational events, speakers of various kinds, that organizations take the responsibility to engage, to talk about issues of women's executive leadership. And as I said earlier, unless there's any doubt about this, it does not matter what institutional sector you look at in America. The higher up you go, the fewer women there are. This is a uniform experience. In addition to educating people, I think that we are now at a point, because at least on the Democratic side, there are 6, I think, declared woman candidates for president, that this issue is going to come up because they are running. And it doesn't matter who you support or whether you're a Democrat or not, their campaigns are going to be covered, their positions are going to be covered. One of them, Gillibrand, is really the centerpiece of her platform is, I'm a woman and a mom. The others aren't sort of messaging that way. So we're going to hear a lot about this, and I think it'll provoke conversation. On a personal note, I would just say the hashtag #VoterIn is a great one. It really applies, and that's intentionally across the board. C-suite, club president, foundation president, university president. Let's vote her in.
I want to add also, there is a wonderful program, I happen to be on the board of it, called the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership Training Academy. And each year recruits and trains about a dozen women on the skills necessary to run for public office. It is a Democratic program. It's modeled after a Republican program, the Lincoln Series. The program was founded by Loretta Durbin, the wife of Senator Durbin. It's been in existence for about 15 years, so about 150 women have gone through it. Among the success stories are Cheri Bustos, who now is chairing the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. So she has reached the highest position in politics as a congressional member because she's in charge of recruiting and training women women and men across the country to run for office. There's also other local candidates who have been through this training program, Deborah Shore, Carrie Steele, a bunch of state reps and state senators. So I would really, if you're thinking that you might want to run for office, you should check out this organization. But more importantly, if you know of a woman in the next who you would like to encourage, you should encourage her to look at the program. Because one of the things that we know about women running for office, and I know you wanted to talk about government too, but women running for office is that women are not as quick to run for office. We tend to self-doubt about our credentials, and we really need others to encourage us. They often say women have to be asked like 3 times before they're going to agree to run for office. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we are lagging behind in women moving forward. One of the things about this I Will training program, and I forgot Juliana Stratton is also an alumni of the program, is that women don't all go into elected office, but also being sought out for government positions is often because of their political experience. So, I'd like to
Maybe you
add
have
that.
time for a couple more questions. Here's one right. Okay, one more. You get the last question.
Wow, it better be a good one. Tina Hone, charter member of your fan club. I work for Dory.
Sweet.
I want to just say this, and the other issue is that when women say they want to run, I've run for elected office and won. But when you step up and you say you want to run, you actually get criticized for doing that. But my question is, if you had one piece of advice for Tony and one piece of advice for Lori, what would that one piece of advice be?
Other than win.
I guess what I would say is I hope that they will both take the opportunity to talk about policies that they will promote that support women and girls. And when they do that, they will also be supporting, among other things, some of the poorest families and most needy families in our city. And I think that's really important. I think the broader mission here is to improve our city. It's been called the global city. We hear that every day from our present mayor, and it will be an even better global city if there is more economic equity in this city, and that starts with helping women achieve equal pay, helping women-headed families in poor neighborhoods get good jobs. So I guess that's what I would say I want to see both of them do.
Well, thank you very much. I want to acknowledge Nancy, too. I want to say one thing. Years ago when we first met and I came to Washington, D.C. as the new press secretary for Congressman John Porter, the person who showed me around the Hill and explained how the place worked was Nancy. So thank you. Thank you very much.
So you'll tell people I'll be Davis members.
Yes, if you'd like to get another copy of Rebecca's book, take one home to a female of your choice. She'll be ready to do some signing afterwards. Thank you very much
And
for
answer
coming,
any
everybody.
question you may have that I didn't get to answer. Thank you all.